Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. Today is Tuesday, December 12th, and we're glad you joined us this evening. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll begin with an invocation by Pastor Jim Miller of Faith Church. And you may come to the microphone. Mr. Swisher, is the microphone on? We're streaming the meeting, so your voice won't be picked up without the microphone, Pastor. Thank you, Mr.
Let's pray.
Swisher.
Let's bow our heads, please. Father God, we thank you so much that we can be here tonight. Thank you for protecting us as we've come. Thank you, Lord, as we celebrate this time of year, your birth. Lord, I look around this room and see the decorations, and we thank you that we can celebrate. Lord, this year we have so many things to be thankful for as we look back. Thank you for your protection, your provision. Lord, I think of Psalms 121 that says, where does our help come from? It comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. So Lord, we're asking you to be our help tonight. Be with our mayor and all the leadership here, that you would help them, give them wisdom, give them insight, give them understanding. And Lord, I pray you continue to protect Kernersville in this area, Lord. May you, Lord, put your angels around this place, keeping us safe. In your mighty name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, the republic, and one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Tonight we have several public hearings. When an agenda is denoted as a public hearing, persons attending shall be permitted to address the Board of Aldermen regarding the item under consideration. Those speaking in favor, speaking first, and those speaking against, speaking second. Proponents and opponents shall each be given 20 minutes of time to speak and may choose to allow one speaker to utilize that time or choose to allocate the time amongst different speakers. In the event that either proponents or opponents have not designated a speaker or speakers to represent that view, the mayor shall divide the 20 minutes by the number of speakers wishing to address the Board of Aldermen, and each speaker shall be allowed that given time within which to express his or her comments, ideas, and concerns. After the opponents speak, the mayor will allow the proponents 5 minutes for rebuttal. If the proponents choose to exercise this option, the opponents will also have 5 minutes for rebuttal. In the event that the proponents do not present a rebuttal, then the opponents shall be given no further time to speak. Our first public hearing is item 1A. It's a public hearing on the Kernersville Development Plan reconsideration, zoning docket KDP 66. And I think we'll hear it combined with the public hearing on the rezoning reconsideration, which is item 1B, which is zoning docket K570A4, with the description more particularly listed in the agenda and on the screen. Mr. Swisher?
Ms. Garner will start.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight, based on your action taken on November 29th, we are going to discuss KDP 66 and K570A4 for reconsideration. K570A2 is the current approval for Caleb's Creek. This was adopted in early 2016, and the site plan shown on the screen is the prevailing site plan that the developer has been working on since its adoption. So this is the currently approved plan. It is a valid plan for construction. It has led to neighborhoods such as Whitehawk, Lakeside, Elk Ridge, Owls Trail, portions of Deer Run, in the neighborhood that's under construction at the corner of Ogden School Road and Teague Lane. So the developer has been working on this plan, and if the reconsideration is not approved tonight, then the developer would be able to continue working on this plan as it is the current approval. KDP 66 and K570A4 were heard originally in July with public hearings at Planning Board and the Board of Aldermen. It includes only the portions of Caleb's Creek that have not yet been developed, as shown in the blue or light purple color on the screen with this map. There is a proposed new set of site plans to serve as the master zoning plan for development of the remaining area. So if this is to be approved, then this plan will sunset, and this plan will be the approved plan for the areas to be developed. Tonight's reconsideration is of the same set of plans that were presented to you in July with revised conditions. As I mentioned, this is the new site plan that has been submitted with the rezoning that was heard in July and is still under consideration for tonight with your reconsideration. It divides the areas that are left to be developed into 7 planning areas. The previous had 40-some, this one has 7. So they have been consolidated for ease of development and laying out final development plans by the developer and working with them by staff. So 7 planning areas. There's a mix of residential that's proposed for all of the planning areas, but the multifamily uses are proposed for planning areas 101 and 102, which are the 2 here shown along I-40. That is part of the revised conditions that Mr. Swisher will cover shortly. There are several sheets that are included in this new master plan exhibit. This is a plan for the linear park and trail system map, and it is also built off of the 2016. So it includes many of the trails that have been constructed, are under construction, or will be constructed based on what was proposed originally in 2016 and how trails might better suit the proposed development moving forward if this is to be adopted. This final exhibit that I'll show tonight is the improvements plan for the road construction. Teague Lane and Ogden School Road are both North Carolina Department of Transportation streets, as well as the Heavenstrat extension, which will connect to State Route 4312. So this we anticipate will likely also be a state road. Old Salem and Teague Lane are included with improvements to the intersection. Old Salem is also a North Carolina Department of Transportation controlled street. So NCDOT has been very involved in the conversations in the preparation of this map and moving forward with changes as they've been proposed. This plan breaks up the construction into several different phases. As you'll see, the colors indicate specific phases that will become very important with the revised conditions, because it will govern how and when certain other things are triggered. So there is a chart that will discuss that in more detail, and we will cover that shortly. So I'll turn it over to you.
Madam Mayor and Board, as you all are aware, the board turned down the proposed 2023 plan in July of this year. At that time, sometime after that, the petitioner filed a lawsuit against the town with certain allegations in the lawsuit. We went into a judicial conference settlement, and Mike could cover all this briefly, but it's just kind of a lead up to where I'm going with the conditions. But we went into a judicial conference settlement. Out of that conference came the reconsideration that you all voted on the 29th and that you're hearing tonight. I have some conditions that I will present that came from that settlement hearing between the town and the petitioner. These conditions address the concerns that the neighbors raised at the July meeting. It's concerns with the rezoning, concerns with the site plan. It doesn't necessarily address the concerns that were brought up about the developer, the way the developer does their projects, all of that. There were a lot of issues brought up regarding, hey, I've got some issues with my house, they haven't been fixed, issues with this or that. Those aren't relevant to the rezoning. They're not relevant to these conditions. So these conditions focus on the rezoning and on that site plan. I think Ms. Garner mentioned in her presentation, I think it's important that the board and that the citizens understand the board doesn't have to pass this rezoning tonight. You didn't pass it in July. You're not required by the judge to pass it tonight. But I want it to be clear that if the rezoning does fail, like Ms. Garner said, it does not mean that the developer leaves and stops doing what they're doing. the development will go on. It will just go on based on the 2016 plan. The 2023 plan that was denied in July was an improvement over that 2016 plan. It clarified a lot of areas in that plan. I think the 2023 plan with these conditions, the new conditions that you'll see here in a minute, are an improvement over that plan in July in the sense that they address some of the main concerns, again, that you all heard at the July meeting. So I'm going to cover the new conditions. I'm not going to read those conditions word for word. If you need me to go back to one, you can ask, I'll go back. These are the conditions that are loaded onto the website under Ms. Garner's memo as well. I just simply copied and pasted them, but I did want to clarify them and answer any questions that you may have regarding those. The first condition, the first new condition is condition number 3. There was a lot of discussion about apartments. We don't want apartments everywhere. In the 2016 plan, there were multiple areas where apartments could be, same way in the plan that was presented and denied in July. Under this condition that you have tonight that we're recommending, it's 1,032 apartments. It's capped at 1,032. There was no cap in either of the other two. And it restricts it to planning area 101 and 102. Those are the two areas along the Interstate 40 there. It also makes it not eligible for a 5% increase. Like in some of the other areas, they can increase density by 5% without having to come back through the rezoning. That is not allowed with apartments. So 1,032 is it. The areas, that's the only place they can go. The next condition, condition number 6, kind of follows up on that. Says residential building, multifamily, and residential building urban shall not be permitted in planning area 107, which I think is the area right along Ogden School Road, kind of south of Ogden School Road. That is a new condition. Before it was allowed there. There had been a plan, I think, maybe proposed with it there. But again, multifamily is restricted just in those two areas. The next condition, condition 22, and also condition 23, there are two conditions that address the amenity areas. As you all remember hearing, a lot of discussion from the neighbors about, hey, I don't have amenities, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have what I've been promised. Number one, in the 2016 plan, there was not a definite timeline as to when those had to be done. And there was not a real definite, I guess, description of how large the amenity area had to be. It was AEM or whatever it may have been called in that. Condition 22 and condition 23, which is there, both of them are very long, very wordy, but it's what they address is that in those two areas total, there has to be a total of at least 6 acres of amenities. Condition 22 specifies how much of that needs to be right along the lakefront. It does give a provision that if they can't build it in the wetlands or the floodplain, then they can have less. But if they are allowed to build it in that area, then they have to have right at 3 acres. The total in condition 22 and 23 is 6 acres of amenities. Condition 23 addresses that they have to have amenity areas in at least 50% of the planning areas. So it's what we heard at the meeting was, we got one pool. It's not going to be enough for everybody. So during the mediation, the discussions came out, we'd like to see more amenity areas in the planning areas. So we've got it in 50% of the planning areas for a total of 6 acres. The 6 acres does not include the 4 acres that are already there with the clubhouse that's in this condition. You'll see that it says the cumulative total acreage of the active amenity areas, including the acreage of the amenity areas adjacent to the lake, shall be at least 6 acres. Neither the existing pool and clubhouse in the planning area known as MU4, nor the existing or otherwise required greenway trails, linear parks, or other trails shall count toward the total acreage requirement or the planning area requirement. So in total, once you include what's already there with the pool and with the clubhouse, it'll be about 10 acres. That's an improvement, a vast improvement, one that we worked really hard, kind of had to struggle with. It's a vast improvement over what was proposed in July that the board turned down the plan. So So far, those conditions, we've limited the apartments, we've improved the amenity area. The next condition addresses the trails, sand rock, whether it's sand rock, crushed stone, or whether it is asphalt. We didn't want the town to accept any that were not asphalt. So all of the trails that the town accepts will be asphalt. None of those will be crushed stone or sand rock. It has in there that they have to be environmentally sensitive areas, where they use the different sand rock and so forth. So we've got the trails, we address those. The next condition, there was a lot of discussion in July regarding there hasn't been any road improvements begun. There hasn't been any of those started. There's a lot of road improvements out there. So it's what we have here is we have condition 25, 26, 27, and 28, and I'll flip through those. All go to a chart that really stipulates when these conditions will be done. So we've nailed it down in the 2016 plan and the 2023 plan. We did not have this, and I'm missing the chart, I think. Let's see if it's here. There it is. So this chart states when the road improvement must start, and it also starts, you can see in there, it goes from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. So in other words, everything in stage 1 has to be completed before stage 2 can start. That wasn't clear in the 2016 plan, wasn't real clear in the first 2023 plan, but it is clear in this. I know there was a lot of discussion about the roundabout at Hitchcock, Tig Lane, Elk Ridge, that area. So the roundabout will begin in the summer of 2024. That's phase 1. It will start, and that'll be the roundabout, and then Tig Lane from Hitchcock Road up to Elk Ridge. The road going up to, I think it's Deer Run. Is that correct, Catherine? Deer Run, the one, I think the lady got up and said, hey, I'm not able to access the other side of Caleb's Creek. Have to go around by Union Cross and come in. That road will begin in the spring of 2026 through the spring of 2027. Realize it's 2 or 3 years away, but when you look at the environmental challenges out there in that particular area, it'll take that long to get the plan submitted to get approval. So this chart, again, covers all of the road conditions, states in there when they have to have them started, when they have to have them done. Same thing for the planning areas, construction phases with those. So it stops them really from starting one area, jumping around to another one until they get that done. So we've got a timeline in there for the road improvements when they have to be started, when they have to be completed, which again was a lot of what we heard at the July meeting where the plan was initially declined. There is one revised condition, and it goes back to the chart, the condition 29, and again, all of these are on the website with Ms. Garner's memo. But this further defines what I just covered in the chart about the way the stages and the phases occur for this to take place. So it's what we've tried to stop is what you all have heard, even at the meeting, what you've been emailed about. It's like, hey, they get out here, they do this, they jump over to another one. They're going to be doing some different areas at the same time, but they have to finish one to move on. So our goal was to hear what the citizens had to say, to hear the main complaints, again, that dealt with the rezoning and the site plan, not necessarily the developer themselves, because in all reality, the truth is you can't or legally rezone a piece of property based on the developer. It's just like if someone comes in with a big box store for a general use, you can't rezone it based on what it might be, because it might not be that if it's a general use. Same case here. the developer was the best developer in the world and you heard nothing but rave reviews about the developer, can't rezone it based on that because they could simply sell the project and somebody else come in. Same thing, if the developer doesn't have rave reviews, you can't rezone it or not rezone it based on that developer. So we took that into consideration. We came up with these conditions that we feel are an improvement over what was denied in July. It's certainly an improvement over the 2016 plan. Again, it nails down the time frames for road construction. It nails down the amenity section. Most importantly, I think it lets folks know what's going in what area. You don't have to worry about apartments being scattered all throughout the plan. That was kind of a big hang up as well. And it also gives staff clear guidance. It's not really up to interpretation. It's not, well, we see it this way, they see it that way. All the conditions are there. The new conditions, there's a lot of conditions in there from the 2023 plan that did not change. They're covered in the memo. I didn't cover them here because it's the same conditions that you saw in July that didn't change. So that's what I've got to add. Again, keep in mind, and I don't think it can be said enough, even without this plan, if this plan does not pass again tonight, which that's up to the board's discretion, this developer is not going to stop building. Still going to be there. You're still going to have the 2016 plan. And at that point, we're going to have to find a way to figure out all the discrepancies in the interpretation. So that's where we are. It's not like the developer just say, the heck with it, and walk away. They'll be out there tomorrow moving dirt. Whether they'll be moving dirt in the right way or not, I couldn't tell you. But I can tell you it's not a walk away deal. It's 2023 plan or it's 2016, one or the other. We feel this is an improvement over that plan, especially with the new conditions that you see before you tonight. If you approve it tonight, if the board so chooses to approve this plan, these conditions would be in effect, not the ones that were at the July plan.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to talk briefly about the litigation and how the litigation fits in with the conditions that you've heard about tonight, Alderman, and then also with regard to the proposed settlement that we're also talking about tonight. The litigation is not settled, the litigation is active, so I'll keep this somewhat brief. Curtis has covered the conditions, but I'm going to give a little bit of the framework, the overlay, just to explain how we got here from a litigation standpoint. To the next slide, Catherine, please. Thanks. You've heard a lot about this. I'll be the third to say it, that this is the 2016 plan. The 2016 plan is the governing zoning of Caleb's Creek. It's the plan and the law pursuant to which the developer is able to develop and would continue to develop. To the next slide, please, Catherine. This is the map from the 23. You've already heard Catherine talk this through. You've heard Curtis talk through it as well, that this is part of the 23 rezoning that was applied for and denied in the board's discretion in July. This was the July rezoning was, I think, in large part intended to address some of the challenges that existed with the current 2016 plan that is currently in place and was meant to improve upon, to the extent possible, some of the challenges from that 2016 plan, both for the developer and I think town staff alike. To the next slide, please, Catherine. These are the recommendations that were issued for the July rezoning. These are not for the rezoning that you're hearing tonight, but these are the recommendations made. The staff recommended approval. Planning board recommended approval of the July rezoning. Again, on that theory that the July rezoning was an improvement upon the challenges that existed from the 2016 plan. The board, of course, ended up denying that rezoning as it can in the board's discretion, but these are the recommendations from that July 23 rezoning. To the next slide, please, Catherine. Then in September of 21, or 23 rather, September 21st of 23, the federal lawsuit was filed against the town. You'll see that there were 10 claims asserted against the town. They covered a number of things based on the same factual corpus, but it is all stemming from really the denial of the July 23 rezoning. And I've highlighted that portion below there because that's really instrumental in terms of how the litigation fits in here. and that part of the lawsuit and part of what the developer is seeking in the lawsuit is there are monetary damage claims there against the town, so on and so forth. But there's also a claim in there to get a judgment or to get the court to order approval of the July rezoning. This that we're hearing tonight is not the July rezoning. So this rezoning you're hearing tonight, again, as you heard Mr. Swisher say, is an improvement upon, in the staff's opinion, improvement upon the July rezoning. So this is actually an improvement from even what the town denied in July, that even if the lawsuit were to succeed, would, in theory, the court has the claim before it to impose upon the town the July rezoning. This rezoning you're hearing tonight is an improvement upon that July rezoning. So it is a compromise, but it is a favorable compromise in the staff's eyes from what was sought for and what is being litigated in the federal lawsuit as far as the July rezoning is concerned. So next slide, Catherine. Then we got into a judicial settlement conference. The court, and this is where some confusion perhaps among the citizenry has arisen, the court ordered the parties to a judicial settlement conference. And what that essentially is, and I know Alderman Barrow knows this well, that it is essentially, we were called into court and we had to talk in front of Magistrate Judge Peak, who's presiding over the litigation as well. And she called us together to see if we could reach a resolution. She does not order us to reach a resolution. She does not order anything coming out of the resolution necessarily, but she orders us to come together and see if peace can be reached rather than the parties utilizing their own resources and judicial resources in litigation if there is peace to be had. Settlement conference open in November. Technically, we still remain in the settlement conference in the sense that the litigation is pending, but it remains stayed. But we remain under the jurisdiction of, and we remain in the settlement conference under the supervision of the federal court. The next slide, please, Catherine. During the course of that settlement conference, I know Curtis covered the conditions ably, but relatively condensedly, because we spent a lot of time with the developer, and we spent a lot of time both in the courthouse and afterward, and since then, working through a set of conditions that both the developer and the town staff thought were in the best interests of all that would work toward a compromise and a resolution of that litigation. From that conference came a proposed agreement, which this board approved on November 29th. And here I've got some important points to summarize what that settlement agreement approved on the 29th would do and what it would not do. And what the agreement would do and what it did when approved by the board on the 29th is that it put into stone the negotiated conditions that the board can consider. Not that the board approved, what the board can consider. The board is looking at them tonight for approval, but all that did was set into stone what conditions can be heard tonight. It was an agreement to propose, again, not actually to reconsider, but to propose reconsideration of the rezoning. The board voted on the 29th to send this to reconsideration, which is why we're here tonight. And then it also committed the developer to dismiss the lawsuit if the board does vote to approve the rezoning with the conditions as modified that are before you tonight. What the agreement would not do, the other side of the coin, it did not end, it does not end the lawsuit. It does not commit the town to reconsideration. The town board ultimately voted to reconsider, and it does not commit the town board to rezone. The board is here tonight to consider whether it wants to, in its discretion, rezone. To the next slide, please, Catherine. I'm going to talk for a second about, I think there's some questions from the public with regard to the reconsideration and the process for that. On the left there, you'll see a provision from the town code with regard to, it's hard to read, that's by design, I'm kidding, but it is, it's a provision with regard to a denial and a resubmittal of a rezoning versus a reconsideration of a rezoning. That top section applies to a resubmittal of a rezoning. That is where a developer has been denied. The board does not open a reconsideration. The developer comes back with the same property owner, comes back with the same rezoning. The property owner, under that law, subsection 1, must wait 2 years before submitting. I will tell you that towns and counties all across North Carolina have the power to and routinely do waive those waiting periods in their discretion. They have that power to do so. That is not what's happening here tonight. That's not what happened on the 29th. This is a reconsideration. The bottom subsection there says, and again, hard to read, but the last sentence essentially says, and I've got the quote there, the resubmittal, it's that third bullet, and I'm quoting from the bottom section, which is a limitation, or at least perhaps it's an exception from that top section. It says that the resubmittal rules, so that top section, shall not constitute a limitation upon the authority of the elected body to reconsider any rezoning of the property. So if there's any question about why this doesn't have to wait for 2 years, this is not a resubmittal, this is a reconsideration. And because it's a reconsideration, that 2-year waiting period does not trigger and does not apply here tonight. And that's why we're here on the 12th instead of 2025. The next slide, please, Catherine. Then from the November 29th meeting of the Aldermen, again, this is where, for those who were not here, there was notice of the settlement agreement and the proposed conditions. The conditions were, they were and are an exhibit to that settlement agreement that was publicly posted in advance of November 29th. During that reconsideration, the board, when it voted to reconsider, and it did on the 29th, it did not approve the rezoning. Again, all it did was say, yes, we agree to reconsider on December 12th, that rezoning. So there was no pre-vote. There was nothing with regard to this rezoning. It was simply a necessary legal step, vote to reconsider on the 12th in a public hearing, whether to rezone pursuant to the modified conditions. Again, what the reconsideration did was it set it for hearing on December 12th. That's why we're all here tonight. The next slide, please, Catherine. I'll talk quickly about the notice that was published, posted, and mailed. Town staff, as it did ably, and this is an incredible thing to have done for a project like this, because the posting and the mailings are no small feat when you're talking about a project of this size. It is extensive, it is complicated, and the notice was done, it was done timely, it was done mailed notice, it was done posted notice, and it was done advertised in the newspaper, in the Kernersville News, all of which are required under the town's UDO, that are required by state law. I will address, some might say, some of that notice, and you'll see those top dates in particular, happened before the November 29th reconsideration. And that was done on my advice, and the reason for that is that predated the November 29th reconsideration, because we had to meet timelines under state law in order to make the December 12th hearing tonight and meet those timeframes that are mandated. Worst case, had the board voted on the 29th not to reconsider, then we simply would not have continued with the notification, and that would have been essentially gone into the void and been an airy nothing. But in the event the board did vote on the 29th, as it did, to reconsider this on the 12th, as we are, we wanted to make sure we were meeting those timelines, meeting that notice for all to see and all to hear, and to meet state law. And so that's why it occurred that way. Next slide, Catherine, please. So this is my last slide, and you can hold your applause until the end. Thank you. But this is the summary slide. That provision on the right is from the settlement agreement. And that provision is essentially what the town and the developer have agreed to. And it doesn't say that the rezoning must be approved, doesn't say reconsideration must occur. It just says, we understand the board has discretion to do what it wants to do. Both town staff appreciate that and the developer appreciate that. And that if the rezoning is approved, then certain things have to occur, including among them a dismissal of the lawsuit with prejudice against the town. Because it is good for the town and it is good for the developer, again, in town staff's view, for these amended conditions, these revised conditions, and this rezoning you're hearing tonight to adopt. However, if the rezoning is not adopted, then the lawsuit persists. So that's all that says. It's not a court order. It's not any pre-agreement or anything done otherwise to bind this board and its discretion. I do have some provisions there on the left with regard to an approval. If there's an approval of the rezoning, this is what essentially it would achieve. It would adopt the modified conditions as developed with and recommended for approval by town staff. You heard Catherine, you heard Curtis. That's an important provision there, recommended for approval by town staff. These modified conditions, modified from what was proposed and denied in July. Second point, that if this is approved, it would supplant and remove both the current 2016 zoning. So the 2016 zoning, as Catherine said, would sunset. It would go away if that gavel strikes tonight and we adopt the rezoning. And also, it would supplant and would remove the July rezoning that was denied. The reason I say that is because, again, with the lawsuit persisting, the court, based on the claims, could order the imposition of the July rezoning. Whereas if you vote tonight on this rezoning modified from that July rezoning, then the July rezoning goes away, the 2016 rezoning goes away, and this rezoning we're talking about tonight is what becomes the law in this town. Third, it legally imposes the conditions that you heard Curtis talk about tonight on the developer, on the property, on Caleb's Creek, whether this developer or a successor developer. It runs with the land. And the last point, it requires the developer to dismiss the lawsuit. Now, if you deny the rezoning tonight, it refuses the benefit of the conditions developed with and recommended for approval by town staff, and the 2016 plan remains the law of Caleb's Creek. It leaves the 2016 plan in place, and the federal lawsuit, the 2016 zoning, and again, the possibility of the July 2023 rezoning persists against the town. And with that, I'll close my presentation, open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thielen. Thank you, Mr. Swisher. Thank you, Ms. Garner. Does the board have any questions at this time? Okay, this is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. It's a combined public hearing on KDP 66, which is the development plan, and K 570A4, which is the reconsideration of the zoning. I have, first I'll recognize the proponents. I have Neil Johnson signed up to speak. Mr. Johnson, if you could state your name and address for the record, and then I do have a question for you.
I'm Neil Johnson of the law firm of Fox Rothschild LLP. My address is 230 North Elm Street in Greensboro, Suite 1200.
Okay, my question to you is, does the petitioner consent to these revised conditions?
Madam Mayor, the petitioner does consent to these revised conditions.
Thank you. Do you have any comments tonight?
I'd like to thank the staff and your council for working very hard with us to come up with a solution that can work for everyone, and I encourage the board to approve it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor? Seeing none, I have speakers signed up in opposition. I will first recognize Gary Holsworth.
My name is Gary Holsworth. I live at 1665 Caleb's Creek. And as the Madam Mayor has already said, I oppose this for several reasons. I know that the board and you, Madam Mayor, will probably agree and adopt this. And most of the people here probably have already come to that fact, that that probably will occur. However, I do want you all as members of the board to realize that Mr. Switzer did talk about amenities. And we have not got any other than what we're calling the itty bitty kiddie pool. We have not got that. The clubhouse is very expensive to rent. There's nobody in this room today that could ever rent that clubhouse. Nobody. The area that they're talking about with the amenities, they've been known not to do amenities, to just simply build an area and move on to an adjacent area. That's been their forte. They do a bait and switch item, what they do. They don't do anything correctly. I can tell you that in the Caleb's Creek area and in the adjacent area, I can tell you that they have not met codes on sidewalks. Over 50% of the sidewalks are breaking up and crumbling. When we take it over as a member of the HOA, we're going to have to fix those. They don't meet code. No way do they meet code. Over 50% of them are crumbling. And I just want you all to realize that, some things need to be done with these people, with the developer. They need to go back in, they need to fix these curbs. They need to fix them the way they're supposed to be fixed before they are moved on to another area. They've already started in across from Elks Ridge and those areas. They're ready to build as soon as you approve it. They're ready to go. And before they move on and leave other people the way we are, I think that you all need to make them or consider having them go back and fix what wasn't right before. And that's really what I'd like to talk about, and have them do those things correctly. Because I don't want to take over, and I'm sure nobody else moving into a new development wants to have areas that are just deteriorating already. And it's a little over 2 years, and these sidewalks should not be falling apart.
Thank you. I'll next recognize Harry Davis.
Yes, my name is Harry Davis. I live at 1676 Pine Tree Lane. I would just like to recognize this gentleman. I appreciate a good sense of humor from the attorneys. I tried to read the amendments and it put me to sleep several times. I'm going to clarify. I don't want to make anybody out here mad. I'm not going to say I'm for or against. I wanted a chance to speak. Several things here. I appreciate the time and the effort to improve on the 2023 plan, moving the density away. There's still a lot of density out there. I don't know if these numbers are right. From the July meeting, you're going from 3.22 units an acre in 2016 to 4.67 units an acre currently on about 180 less acres. That seems like a lot of people. I'm not an expert on density and population, but that seems like a lot. The environmental impact that's going on out there, I had mentioned in an email, a proposal, an amendment. Is it possible to do a condition? The dust. I could flood your emails with pictures of dust. I'm a realistic person. I know you can't eliminate dust. I understand that. But something along the lines of requiring the developer and or their subcontractor to take some type of a step, a good faith effort. Run a water truck 3 times a day. Run a water truck at least 3 times a day. If it hadn't rained in 48 hours, some kind of stipulation, because we live out there. I had days where my kids didn't go outside and play because they would have been playing in a dust storm. Again, dry summer. I know there's not so much you can do, but if you do something, that's better than nothing. Something else, don't know how you would address this, a lack of supervision. I don't mean the guy nailing the hammers or whatever, but it seems like there's no readily available on-site partner. My parents, Penny and Richard Hedgecock, 1358 Rock Barn Road, they're in the middle of Weldon. That gentleman got recognized with an award, by the way, for his development progress, but there's somebody there, it seems like, that you can reach. There seems to be nobody there that has the authority or the ability or is empowered to listen to a concern and then try to address the concern. Again, I don't know how you could do that, but that's a big, to me, and maybe to some other folks, but I only speak for myself, that's a big problem. If there's not an invested partner or principal kind of on site some throughout the week that hears these concerns that can, y'all, the different parts of the town, Diener, North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, can communicate with and say, hey, you got an issue, you need to fix it. That brings me to my next thing on the environmental impact. I talked about dust mitigation. There still seems to be a lot of notice of violations and environmental concerns that aren't being fixed. So I want to make sure, whether or not this gets approved, hopefully the better option will happen, but that these environmental concerns aren't just getting looked at, but they're being addressed and fixed. And I know that's not up to y'all to fix them, but it's up to somebody besides the developer. Well, it's up to somebody to enforce the rules and make sure that the actions are taken, steps are taken to fix the violations. And I'd just like to throw in there, it's been 18 months and I still don't have an easement. I didn't see on that chart that Mr. Swisher put up, Pine Tree Lane, that's the road that I live off of, is that going to be considered a private road? Do you know?
We'll add that to a list of questions, so
Okay.
continue.
That's about it, but as far as the easement, as far as the dust mitigation and water truck, you've all seen it, I'm sure, read my email. Is that something that can be done tonight, put in there so that they have a concrete, definitive way that they have to try to mitigate the dust?
Just keep on.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very
Do you have
much,
any
and I
other-
sincerely appreciate both parties trying to make things better.
Do you have any other questions or, okay, thank you, Mr. Davis. Yeah. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition?
I'm sorry, I did not.
Just come forward to the microphone and we'll need your name and address.
I'd just like to make this statement. My name is Joyce Kreider. I live at 1670 Pine Tree Lane.
Hang on a second. Do you have the spelling of her name, Keith? Okay, you heard her address properly? Okay, continue.
I'd just like to make this statement. It was so bad this summer that the federal mail was not being delivered to my home because they declared my road too dangerous to come down. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition? If you come forward, give your name and address for the record.
My name is Joseph Paul Hoberick. I live at 1623 Cooper's Hawk Drive.
Okay, hold on just a second. Mr. Clerk, have you got his name and his spelling? Do you need him to spell his name? Could you please spell your name or?
Last name is H-O-B as in boy, E-R-E-K.
And then, do you need his address again? Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Yeah, so I just have two comments. And I'm not sure of the legal terms, but my understanding is this whole process was done without the participation of the town of Kernersville citizens or the residents of Caleb's Creek. So any opportunity for us to interject our concerns, not what came out of a meeting 6 months ago, but the process that is taking place right now, that we could sit down and say, hey, what are our primary concerns? And you heard a couple of things, and one thing that's void of this is public safety. So what do we have going on, public safety? The trucks, the dust, the dam, stormwater, all the regulatory requirements that are supposed to be met on a daily basis. We, as residents, have to step up and call people, as opposed to it being done on a daily basis. We have temporary trails that we are allowed to walk on, but there's a hunt club out there. And we call, and everybody says, well, if you call, we'll stop it. We want the prevention. We want it eliminated. We want it gone. I've lived there 3 years, so we're on year 3. So that would be something that would need to be put in here that says, hey, we're going to eliminate that. We'll form a task force, we'll sit down, and we're going to eliminate all of the safety concerns that happen in our development. Keep in mind, and I said development, it's now a community, 600 families. We shouldn't have to deal with those issues. The town of Kernersville, what do they say for their mission statement for protection of the citizens? Prevention. We shouldn't have to call to hear a gunshot. What are we doing on the preventative side to stop the hunting in a community at Caleb's Creek that has 2 schools? So the second point, this process is complicated. So everybody here had full-time employees, special interest attorneys, met all 40, 80-hour work weeks, who knows? We're given this little bit of time to digest this information without participation. So we'd like a stay to vote no so that we can participate in this process and get our concerns addressed. And thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone further to speak in opposition? Mr. Johnson, would you like to do a rebuttal? And the rebuttal is limited to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On behalf of BOMA, we'll waive rebuttal.
Thank you. All right, if the proponent does not do a rebuttal, then there's no counter rebuttal. Mr. Swisher, would you like to address some of the questions that came up? As to the dust truck, maybe we'll start there. Or the water truck to combat the dust. I think you researched that extensively based on a prior email you received from
I'll
Harry.
let Mike address that one, and
Okay.
then I'll address a couple of the other ones that are in there, I believe.
Okay. Mr. Thielen, then?
So, Madam Mayor, to address the question with regard to the dust, issue, that is technically legally governed by the sedimentation and erosion control permitting. So therefore, it's first of all, it's already a regulation that the developer has to abide. So to impose it as a condition would simply be redundant of that. More to the point, the permitting is actually not controlled by the town. So it would be to impose a condition and force to impose enforcement by a body, the governmental body, the town, that is uninvolved in the permitting and not involved in the enforcement of that permitting. So that is that's a sedimentation and erosion control permitting question, and it's not a town question.
So if a citizen has concerns about that during the construction process, should their complaint be directed to what agency or to the Community Development Department, and then we follow up on it?
So it should technically go to the Department of Environmental Quality, and I know staff has been in receipt of the complaints and has been pressing the State Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, as we commonly call it. I know town staff has been, I think the word we were using was lighting them up. Town staff has been lighting up DEQ on behalf of the citizens, even though that's not town staff's purview, but has been doing so on behalf of the citizens to get DEQ to enforce its sedimentation and erosion control permitting parameters with regard to the dust. And DEQ is not upholding, as far as I understand, its end of the bargain. But I think so the questions can go, and I would encourage the citizens to go to the Department of Environmental Quality. But if there are questions that do come to Catherine or to town staff, to Curtis, that they can rest assured that they're being pushed out to DEQ appropriately.
Okay, Curtis, do you have anything further on that? The citizens can still call Community Development to complain about that, and we'll forward their complaints on it, but they could also directly contact DEQ, as I think Mr. Davis has talked with them quite extensively, haven't you, Harry? Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, they can contact staff. We'll give them the contact at DEQ. We'll follow up with DEQ as well on that.
So so just to understand, so the zoning case is more conditions for development. There's some general law that still applies to this developer and all developers as they develop, including these environmental regulations.
That is correct.
Okay, so as to the environmental regulations, I think, Curtis, you referenced and responded to the violations and the notices of violations in a prior meeting, but if you would like to address that question that came up.
You know, I think there's been some folks tonight even that have mentioned some notices of violations that occur out there, have occurred. Some of them are the same violations that occur again, and my response to that has been, that's really not that unusual. Probably every development in town that's ever been developed at some point or another, especially one of this size, has received notice of violations for various violations, especially if it's near a creek, body of water, things like that. So those are addressed not through the rezoning. I mean, you can't have a rezoning condition that says you'll not receive any notice of violations. You kind of go into that knowing that you shouldn't really receive any, but you may. We handle that through the applicable department, whether it be stormwater, community development, public services. We take care of those notice of violations and issue those, whichever department it is that issues them. I think there's usually a 10-day to a 30-day period for the correction of that to take place. If they do not correct that notice of violation in the given time period, then it is a daily fine beginning on whatever day that they have to have it corrected by. So we do that outside of the zoning conditions. Sometimes they may receive a notice of violation for a zoning condition, and we handle that as well.
So at the meeting we had the last week in November, there were 2 outstanding violations that Mr. Davis reminded us of, but the time limit for compliance had not passed yet. It had to be complied with by the end of the day, November 30th. Do you happen to know what happened with those notices of violation?
I do not know exactly. I know they were working on one of those, and I think there were 2. Do you know whether they both were cleared up or if there was given an extension of time on that?
There have been no notices of violation issued by community development. The ones that I'm aware of were issued by public services, and the developer has proposed a time frame for mitigation and completion of the reasons they got the notice of violation, and that is Wendy Hardup's to manage. But last I saw that they had submitted their compliance schedule and are working through that with Wendy.
Doran, as Director of Public Services, and you oversee the Stormwater Department, do you have anything to add or further information on those notices of violation? Not tonight, okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Garner. All right, then the question about crumbling and defective sidewalks and crumbling curbs. I think that would be handled with our inspectors, is that?
It depends, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
I'm not sure which part the gentleman lives in, but there is a part of, is it White Hawk, or that is private?
Yes, it's White Hawk has private streets and private sidewalks.
And so they are not under our regulation.
Do you live in White Hawk?
No, I live in Caleb's Creek. It's off of White Hawk. It's not a city maintained.
Okay, well, if it's private, then that's not on us. We require the public roads and public sidewalks to be up to our standards before we accept those. There are some out there that we have not accepted yet because they've not put the final layer of asphalt down. But if they're not public streets or public sidewalks, we don't accept them. That is entirely on the HOA to maintain those. And there is a portion of White Hawk that's probably 3 streets maybe in there, 3 different streets, that is private. And there's a sign as you enter it that says public maintenance ends here. And it's what that means is exactly what it says. Public maintenance ends here. It's built to whatever standard, and that's what it is. I think you all have seen that. Several different neighborhoods in Kernersville have came before the board at various points in time with the same issue with private streets or private sidewalks.
And then Miss Kreider's Road, that was too dangerous for a mail truck to go down, is that a private road or a public road?
That is a private road that belongs, I think I'm saying this right, Catherine, but help me out. That's kind of a private road that belongs to the developer, and Ms. Kreider has an easement from Tig Lane to her driveway. Is that correct?
At the moment, with the completion of phase 2 of Lakeside, which is the development that will go up to Pine Tree Drive. At that point, Pine Tree Drive will be a publicly dedicated road. The plans have been approved by the town. We are waiting on the developer to finish with City County Utilities Commission to provide us the plans to sign. When that portion of what we know as RL 23, but what the community knows as Lakeside is platted, it will become a publicly dedicated street. We understand that there are people who are waiting on that, both the Kreiders and the Davises. And so we are also anxious to see that get platted, so they will have some relief.
Okay, so the plating timeframe is a little bit on the developer, it sounds like?
The civil plans come first, so the construction plans come first. Those have been reviewed and approved by the town. We're waiting on the developer to finish up some other things with the Utilities Commission before providing us the set to sign. And then the plat will come after that. So it is still a ways off, but it is in progress. And when the plat is approved, then Pine Tree will become a publicly dedicated road.
And that's happening under the 2016 adopted plan?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. as far as the hunting on the property and tree stands and the hunt club, Mr. Swisher, I know you've worked with the KPD and citizen concerns about that for several years now.
Yes, ma'am, and honestly, we thought it was pretty much done last year, before last. Number one, it's not illegal to have deer stands on the property. It's not illegal to be in the deer stands. It is illegal to be hunting from the deer stands. I understand the gentleman's concern. Unfortunately, this is not the only place in town that we do have hunting occurring. We have just recently caught 2 individuals hunting from deer stands on private property into Pope Park. So not only does it occur on large developments that are owned by developers, it also occurs on town property. We do try to stop it. I know Captain Tilley spoke with Mr. Hoberic tonight. I think they're going out tomorrow and try to locate the deer stands that are on the property. You know, it's one of those things we've got to be called pretty quickly once it happens so that we can get out there before the folks actually shoot the deer and move on. I mean, it's a pretty quick process on their end. They can shoot it, have it loaded up and be out before we get out there. I did go back and look. We've been called, all we could find was about 3 times this year since January regarding hunting on that property. We've responded each time. We have been out for various incidents, not dealing with hunting, but we will go out tomorrow. I think someone's going out, is that correct? So we'll go out tomorrow, locate those deer stands, and then if we are called again, hopefully we can get out before the folks get out of there. But, you know, again, it's one of those things. It's a large, very large tract of property, and we see that happen. We had it happen, like I say, at Pope Park. We had it happen last year at Ivy Redmond Park on the parcel that the town just purchased. So, you know, it's large tracts of land like that. Folks still have a tendency to hunt on those. And it may or may not be someone affiliated with the developer. That's the even worse part. It could just be someone that has put their deer stand up and goes out and hunts. But we will make an effort to go out and try to stop that. Usually if we can catch them, they won't repeat the same offense again. Their buddy may, but they probably won't.
Okay, and then the question about the dam that's out there and the safety of the dam.
That one's, I don't know that much about that.
There are conditions that did not change from the July proposal to present proposal that cover having inspections of the dam by the Dam Safety Board in Raleigh and having that done before it is, and any repairs identified made before the dams are turned over to the Homeowners Association. So those conditions were anticipated in July and have remained in this revised proposal.
Okay, and then public safety, any development plan is reviewed in Development Review Committee with our police department and our fire rescue department and our public services department. So all plans are reviewed for the safety of road widths and ability of trash trucks to turn around, fire engines to turn around, and all of that. So do you have any other public safety comments on that?
No, ma'am. As you mentioned, I think all of the plans meet those requirements. And again, what Mr. Hoberic was referring to with the deer hunting, we'll go out and try to get that stopped as well.
Okay, and Mr. Thielen, I think you covered the public involvement and participation, the letters that were sent out, this posting, the public hearing tonight, and the public hearing that we had in July. But do you have anything else to add on that?
I do not, Madam Mayor. I think it has met the standards for state law and under the town's UDO as well with regard to public notice. And Catherine does a nice job of putting all of the necessary documentation up onto the website, onto the town's website, so that it is everything is publicly available. And her memorandum, from which Curtis's presentation flows with regard to the conditions and the rationale for each condition, has also been up there since the end of November, such that all of that was publicly available, which is above and beyond what I would call the state and the UDO require for an ordinance like this.
Okay, and so that's online as one of the attachments, I believe, under item B. Is that correct, Curtis? The memo?
That is correct.
Memo
Yes,
with
that first
revised
hyperlink.
conditions.
That's correct.
Madam Mayor, I will add on top of that, the public notice signs. I know that there was some questions about where they were located. There were at least 3 signs. I know there were 2 signs on Tig Lane. There was 1 sign on Ogden School Road that had gotten pushed down that we went and put back up. There was a sign on Hitchcock Road. There was also a sign, I believe, on Watkins Ford Road. There were some signs in the neighborhoods, in the interior neighborhoods, the neighborhood off of Glenview, and then the neighborhood off of Watkins Ford Road. Those signs were at the back of the neighborhood. They have to be located there. State law specifies where they have to be. They have to be on the property that is being rezoned. So we could not put them at the front because that's not the property that was being rezoned. It was a property at the back. We put them just as close as we could. Mr. Powell, the town attorney, and myself went out and looked. Those signs were all up last week on Thursday. I think in total there were probably, with the FDP signs and the rezoning signs, I think there were right about 20 signs. Those signs were put up the week of the vote on the reconsideration. The adjoining property owner letters were mailed out that same week. The first ad ran in the paper that same week as well. And the second ad for the public hearing ran last week. So all of those were out. There were some, again, that were at the end of the neighborhoods, but that's where they had to be. Those signs that were at the end of the neighborhoods, there were lead-in signs at the beginning of the neighborhood as you turned in on the main road. There are lead-in signs that have an arrow and it says case K, whatever it is, 570.84 with an arrow. Then as you turn on the next street, there was another lead-in sign, and so it showed you to the property that was being rezoned. So all of the signs were up. In total, like I say, there were probably 20 signs out there, and they were all up when Mr. Powell and myself checked last week, with the exception of the one on Ogden School Road. We notified Public Services. They went out that day and put it back up. I don't know how long it had been down. I think it had been down a couple of days, but that was the only one that we saw down of the ones that were supposed to be out there.
I would also add, Madam Mayor, that the 12th meeting was called in the November 29th Alderman meeting. So on top of the written notice, the posting notice, and the advertisement, this meeting was also noted in the November 29th Board of Aldermen hearing as well, as opposed to, and calling for this particular rezoning to be reheard was called for on November 29th, which is, again, beyond what state law and what the UDO would require for notice for a public hearing.
This meeting was also included on the adopted calendar for the 2024 meeting schedule. It's not a special meeting. It's a meeting we had decided back in December to have a meeting this date. We didn't know what clearly would be on the agenda today, but this meeting has been planned.
That's correct.
All right, I think the last question I heard was about the density compared to the plan that was submitted, and the rezoning hearing was held on July 23rd. Has the density changed, or have you recalculated it? Because the apartment units weren't defined back then.
The apartments are consistent with what was proposed in July, but are improved from how they were shown in 2016. The density calculations from the July plan to the present are the same, because the plan portion of this rezoning case have not changed. It's just the conditions. So the consistency of the density that was stated in the July staff report is still the same.
Thank you. Is there any other questions raised by the speakers we need to cover on your list? Okay. Does any alderman have a question of anyone in this room?
Curtis, I just got one question on the those deer stands and whatnot. Do they have any kind of signing out there to be making people aware that they cannot hunt from those deer stands?
I have not looked, Alderman Gorham, but it's my understanding that there are not any. So we will, if there are not, when we go out there tomorrow, we will contact the property owner and the HOA. And
that might be
management
helpful
company,
to
let them
make
know,
people
yeah.
aware that, you know,
I
some
think
people
they're-
might not be aware that they can't.
I think they were going to put some up don't know if they ever did, but I think I did hear at one time there were some up and then they got missing. I don't know if they're back, but we'll find out tomorrow.
Okay.
And if there's not, we'll ask them to put some up.
Okay, thank you.
If someone throws out something in the wrong trash can, like they throw recycling into the yard waste cart or whatever, the town can put a notice on their cart that that's a violation, that they need to put it in the proper receptacle. Can we put in something at the deer stands when we find them that you're not allowed to hunt in the town limits?
We can look and see. I mean, it's town code that you can't hunt in the limits, but we might can put some type of notice on it. I don't know.
Madam Mayor, the only concern that I have is that I don't know if it's going to be good practice for us to go on private property without a call for service. Is it?
Okay.
That's my only concern with that. I don't think we need to make that a practice. If it was public property or public street or something like that, I would have no problem, but I think we just need to be very careful about what we do on private property without calls for service.
Okay. All right, so you're going to ask the property owner to post it? Is that what
Yes,
you're saying?
ma'am.
Okay.
We'll work with the property owner on that. I'm assuming all of it is on property that's owned by BOMA. So if it is, we'll get with BOMA and ask them to post it, and then let the folks, if they know whose deer stands they are, to let them know that they can't hunt. I know we've done that in the past. We went out and talked to the individuals that were hunting. So I don't know if it's the same group, no idea. But I know in the past, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3, that we did go out and talk to some individuals that were out there actually hunting on the property. And to my knowledge, that group has not been back out. But again, I've not been out there. It could be the same group or it could be a different group. But we'll go out tomorrow. We'll talk with the property owner. Got Mr. Johnson's email. We can get him to get in touch with the property owner and see if we can work something out.
And again, that's not a condition we can put as rezoning. That other law applies
Correct.
to that.
That's correct.
Did you have a question? Okay, so I held the public hearing open to get all these questions answered, to make sure that we didn't need to call on anyone else. So at this point in time, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And then is there a discussion by the board? Looks like we have proposed motions for or against this development plan and the reconsideration of the rezoning, and we would vote on them in 2 separate votes. So the first would be item 1A, which is the Kernersville Development Plan reconsideration, which is zoning docket KDP 66. And that's consideration of an amendment to the Kernersville Development Plan to amend the land use plan from traditional neighborhood development, private open space, private recreation, business center, and environmental protected to traditional neighborhood development and environmental protected for portions of non-addressed parcels with the pins listed on the agenda, containing a total of 593.61 acres. Zoning docket KDP 66.
It's on now. The PIN numbers have updated at the tax office. So that proposed motion that you have probably has the old PIN numbers. If you'd like, I can give you the new ones.
So the PIN numbers on the agenda say formerly PIN number 6873890200. So is the correct PIN number?
The correct PIN numbers are 68748000354. The other one also changed. It is 6874548378. And if Catherine, if you can click on that resolution, that the resolution does have the updated PIN numbers. We found that out from the tax office late last week.
So make sure I have the right attachment. So that would be the attachment that is R 2023 updated KDP 66. Can't read the full title of it. Oh, there it is. Updated KDP 66 amending Kernersville LEN.pdf. So that includes the PIN numbers of 6874 80 0354 and 6874 54 8378. Mr. Thielen, does this affect anything substantially for this public hearing and for this decision we're called upon to make? That the PIN numbers are different?
Well, I do think that the PIN numbers need to be correct. They've changed, Catherine, in the sense of they've gone away, or those PIN numbers no longer exist? What is the issue with regard to the changes in the PIN numbers?
From July, and then also from the time of the notice, there were some land that was subdivided off and sold by the developer, and when property is modified like that, the Forsyth County Register of Deeds and the tax office changes the PIN numbers. So we are at their mercy on what they want to, how they want to.
Okay, so we
don't have
updated PIN numbers with regard to.
What Keith has read off is the new PIN numbers.
Okay.
Those are the valid PIN numbers now from Forsyth County. We've had
From Forsyth County.
lots of conversations
So
with them.
as long as the motion includes the updated PIN numbers. So if a motion is made either way, we can go in and handwrite from what Keith has to update from what you have before you in terms of a draft motion and give the corrected PIN numbers so that it can be read properly from the dais. But I think the written motions they have before them are different from the resolution.
That's correct.
Yeah. Maybe here, let's do it this way. Madam Mayor, do you have a draft, do you have a copy of the motions in front of you?
Yeah, I've got it. The agenda for A has one of the new PIN numbers with the former PIN number listed, and the second PIN number listed is the old one.
Madam Mayor, that's correct. We found out one of the PIN numbers had changed, and we were able to update that one on the agenda. But then we found out the other PIN number had also changed after the fact.
Keith, so that we're clear, the two correct PIN numbers are 6874-80-0354. Is that correct?
That's one of them, yes.
And the other one is 6874-54-8378.
That's also correct.
So those two are correct.
Yes.
And are they the same PIN numbers for both A and B?
Item B includes a portion of a different PIN as well. And that's also been updated on that ordinance.
Okay, what's the PIN numbers for item B?
The motions for item B don't have PIN numbers.
Motions for B
The
don't have the PIN numbers.
Okay.
The ordinance doesn't reference PIN numbers specifically for the reason that the tax office changes PIN numbers without telling people.
Gotcha. Okay. So the motion that we need the PIN numbers for, those PIN numbers are correct, the ones I just read?
Yes,
Okay.
So,
as presented on the online resolution.
so just to be clear, the physical map has not changed. The map that was advertised, the map that's included in all of the materials that have been available is the same. It's just the PIN numbers assigned by the office to those parcels on the map are different.
To my knowledge, that is correct, because the applicant has submitted the meets and bounds of what is to be rezoned. The portions that were sold off were already under review for construction under the 2016 plan. It's part of Deer Run, and then that area at Teague and Ogden, which was approved by the planning board last year, year before, so those were already underway under the 2016, which is why we require the meets and bounds property descriptions.
And have, Mr. Thielen, are we confident about the meets and bounds description that's been?
I mean,
Everyone agrees.
yes,
We all agree on the meets and bounds.
I think everybody agrees on the meets and bounds. I think everybody agrees on the meets and bounds
Okay.
because it is, and it's, by law, the applicant can only zone the property that it owns. So unless there's consent from the other property owner. So to the extent something has been less than accepted by virtue of sale, that would be essentially, that would void the rezoning. I would take the position it would void any effort to rezone a portion that is technically encumbered, that is not actually owned by the property owner.
Okay, and then, since this is the same physical pieces of land, the signs that were posted, whether at one point in time it was PIN number 6873890200 or changed at some date to 6874-80-0354, it was the same physical piece of property. Okay. So there was signs posted on the appropriate properties, as we've already gone through, and the PIN number's just a tax office issue that we could not control.
Yes, ma'am.
That's right. And Madam Mayor, the inclusion of PIN numbers is not a necessary part of a rezoning, but if they're included, they should be correct, is I suppose the issue.
Okay,
That's the best way to say it.
okay, fantastic. All right. So that brings us back to agenda item 1A, KDP 66, and then we'll take a separate vote on agenda item 1B, K574. So first we're considering KDP 66.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move approval of the attached resolution to revise the land use plan designations for the portions of PINs 6874-80-0354 and 6874-54-8378 under rezoning in case K570.84 from traditional neighborhood development, business center, private recreation space, and environmental protected to traditional neighborhood development and environmental protected, subject to rezoning case approval of K57.84.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson.
Second.
I have a second by Alderman Gorham. All in favor? Please signify by raising your right hand. All opposed? Okay, then that brings us to agenda item 1B, which is K570A4.
Madam Mayor, I'll move approval. Move to amend the Unified Development Ordinance of the town by rezoning the property in case K570.84 from MU-S to MU-C, the said zoning being consistent with the town's comprehensive plan, Kernersville Development Plan, subject to approval of associated case KDP-66, and further being both reasonable and in the public interest because of the following facts.
1, the petitioner requests a conditional use district zoning to allow a specific site plan to be considered without subsequent requirement of detailed FDPs to be submitted for planning board's review in order to ensure development of specific planning areas as identified in developer submitted Exhibit A, meets all applicable regulations, and has obtained all necessary federal and state permitting. Number 2, petitioner's plan will add residential housing units of multiple types in order to offer choice of selection in housing market and with a density differential of 1.09 additional units per acre. And number 3, the petitioner's plan provides a coordinated approach to construction across the Caleb's Creek Common Plan of Development.
And then the site plan.
Site plan approval subject to the revised conditions.
I have a motion in favor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All in favor signify by raising your right hand. All opposed? It's 3-1. All right, we have been meeting now for an hour and a half, so I'll declare a brief recess. All right, good evening and welcome back to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. We are now to item 1C, which is a public hearing on an annexation. And then, is it related to the development plan, Catherine?
Yes, item E, F, M, no, I'm sorry. I'm too far ahead. C, D, and E are all related. There we go.
Okay, so we've got a public hearing on annexation. We've got a public hearing, item D, on the Kernersville Development Plan, zoning docket KDP 67. And then we've got the rezoning for Sherwood Forest Partners LLC for the estate of Bernice Idle Smith, Jennifer Smith Rolson, David Harold Smith, and Danny Eugene Smith, applicant owner. And that is zoning docket K 810. Mr. Powell, can we do that as one public hearing? All right, we'll do it as one public hearing then. And so we are considering now items 1C, item 1D, and item 1E. We'll begin with a presentation by our staff, and I'll recognize Ms. Garner.
Madam Mayor, before she starts, you will have to do the annexation by itself.
Oh, by itself, okay. All right. And hence the question. Okay. All right. Let's start with item 1C then. Public hearing on an annexation. It's a voluntary contiguous annexation petition by the same parties, Jennifer Smith Rolson, Danny Eugene Smith, David Harold Smith, and estate of Nola Bernice Idle Smith for properties located at 1825, 1827, and 1831 NC Highway 66 South, containing 8.613 acres, more or less. We'll begin with the presentation by Catherine Garner, and your presentation is going to include all three?
I don't have a slide specifically on the annexation, but it is related to what is being proposed for rezoning. So it is two parcels along Highway 66 across from Weldon and Eastover Drive, as shown, highlighted in red. It's this larger parcel, which does include portions of what is known as McIdle Road, and then this smaller parcel right here. There are some other parcels like this one, and this one are not included.
All right, I couldn't see where you were pointing. Could you repeat?
Oh, does it not show up? Oh, it doesn't show up. That's convenient.
Okay, so Eastover is where?
Eastover Drive is part of the red shaded area that's
Okay.
across NC 66 from the parcels that are included in the rezoning. It is the larger tract and then the small square that fronts onto 66. There are other smaller tracts that are not included. The way that larger parcel is laid out makes the other smaller parcels difficult. They do have an annexation plat that shows this, and this was advertised at your November meeting for the hearing to be set today, and it was advertised in the paper.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is a public hearing on the annexation. I'll declare the public hearing open. And it looks like I have Jason Grubbs signed up to speak. And this would be just as to the annexation, Mr. Grubbs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. I'm Jason Grubbs. I'm an attorney with Coltrane Grubbs, 109 East Mountain Street, Suite C, 27284, and I represent the petitioners in this matter. Really wouldn't ask to be heard on the specifics of the annexation as they sort of follow along with the rest of the matters you're going to be hearing, other than to say that I believe my understanding is the annexation can be conditioned upon the approval of the rezoning and the change to the land use plan, and we would ask the board to do that. We obviously don't want to have property annexed that we're then not going to rezone. So, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else here to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing on the annexation closed. Do I have a motion to approve the rezoning or a motion to deny the rezoning? I'm sorry.
Madam Mayor, I move approval.
Let me say that. Do I have a motion to approve? I misspoke. My apologies, and thank you for the correction. Do we have a motion to approve the annexation or a motion to deny the annexation? Mr. Penix?
Madam Mayor, I would like to move it be approved.
Okay, I've got a motion by Alderman Penix. Got a second by Alderman Barrow. All in favor? Ms. Garner, it's conditional on the rezoning, correct?
However you state it is however the motion will go as far as I understand procedural requirements. So
Okay, we hadn't stated it. Would you like to make Mr. Penix? Okay. All right, I've got a motion by Alderman Penix, a second by Alderman Barrow. Keith, do you have the motion? Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Thompson. All in favor? It's unanimous. All right, and it is conditional on the rezoning. Okay, are we ready to move on? Okay, we'll move on then to items D and E.
the first portion, item D, is for the KDP, number 67. This is a land use plan amendment from rural residential and low-density residential to activity center. The location is at 1827 and 1831 NC Highway 66 South, parcels being 688477-2003 and 6884764869. I feel pretty good about these PIN numbers, but if they've changed, then Mr. Grubbs can notify us during his portion of the hearing. The associated rezoning case is K810, and the request is from Forsyth County residential single-family to general business within the town of Kernersville. The map shows the current land use plan with the darker yellow as rural residential and the brighter yellow in the triangle at the bottom as low-density residential. Activity center is the blue that's located on the left side of the map, which is the west side of North Carolina Highway 66 South. The land use plan defines rural residential as intended to provide residents and visitors with views of rural vistas and scenic open space by accommodating agricultural uses, large parcel of minimum lot size 5 acre residential development, open space, and conservation subdivisions. These uses would generally be where public water and sewer is not available. The area would be seen as a target area for agricultural preservation measures and incentives. Rural crossroad communities such as Colfax may combine residential, commercial, and institutional uses in a rural setting. Low-density residential, the other current designation, is defined as the town has identified that one of its unique high-quality community components is residential areas that are predominantly single-family residential. The larger the single-family designated area, the greater the supply of available land, which assists in supporting a greater price range of single-family homes. The low-density single-family residential has been the primary land use in Kernersville. However, rising housing costs and smaller household size is causing a greater demand for higher density residential. Low-density residential shall have a density of 0 to 3 units per acre. Unless the area has a lower density, then 0 to 2 units per acre shall be considered. The proposed designation would be for activity center, which is defined as intended to accommodate compatible mixed uses in a walkable setting with higher density development, locates jobs, shopping, and housing within walking distance of each other, can be either a large community scale or smaller village scale. Uses include office/research, multifamily residential, high density single-family residential, compatible retail, hotel, institutional, and related uses. Would prohibit low-density housing, heavy industrial, incompatible retail, and other uses not supportive of functional mixed-use development. Would include common design guidelines for buildings and streetscape, strong links between sites and open space and public facilities. Such centers are designed to accommodate quality regional and local transit service, strong internal and external bike and pedestrian linkages, and connections to public services and facilities. Guidelines would differ according to the scale and functions of each activity center. The activity center in this area is centered along North Carolina 66, Highway 66, and Old Salem Road. Changing the land use plan is necessary to support the rezoning to the general business zoning district. Existing land uses in the immediate vicinity of this parcel are low-density residential. Weldon across the street is a higher-density residential with commercial as part of its components. But beyond this parcel, or these two parcels to the east and further south along the 66 corridor, is still predominantly low-density residential. Traffic improvements to the North Carolina Highway 66 corridor have not yet been completed. There have been many that are proposed as part of Weldon and future build-out of the 66 corridor, but they have not been completed to date. Staff's recommendation was for denial of the KDP amendment for the two parcels. This was presented to Planning Board in November. Planning Board's recommendation is approval of the KDP amendment, the land use plan amendment, to designate the properties located at 1827 and 1831 North Carolina Highway 66 South from rural residential and low density residential to activity center. The vote is shown on the screen. It did carry with the majority of those members present. Any questions on the KDP before I move to the rezoning? K810 is the associated rezoning case for the annexation and the KDP. This is a general district rezoning, so there is no associated site plan and there's no ability to provide conditions. The petitioner is Sherwood Forest Partners, LLC, for the owners of the estate of Ms. Smith, Ms. Rollison, Mr. Smith, and the other Mr. Smith. The proposed zoning amendment is from Forsyth County RS20 to general business, and all general business uses would apply across the 8.613 approximately acres of these two tracts. Other adjacent zoning districts are Forsyth County Limited Business, Forsyth County Residential Single Family, to the north across McIdle Road, to the east and to the south. Forsyth County General Industrial Special is also located to the south. And then west across North Carolina Highway 66 is both Forsyth County Agricultural and Kernersville Traditional Neighborhood District Special. And that is Weldon, as you see in the hatched area, the red hatched. Land use plan was just discussed. It is currently rural residential and low density residential, and it is proposed to go to activity center with the associated KDP case. In a general rezoning, all general business uses must be considered as part of the rezoning request. The site is located within the Highway Corridor Overlay District, and so there are some uses that are prohibited by the Overlay District. Those have been marked through and stricken in the table in the staff report, but all uses could be established according to necessary permitting requirements if the general business zoning district is approved. Staff's analysis in the case is that general business would allow a wide range of retail, service, and office uses that are inconsistent with surrounding residential uses along NC Highway 66. The land use plan recommends this area remain rural residential and low-density residential. And while road improvements are expected as Weldon builds out, the timing of these infrastructure pieces are unknown at this time. And staff remains concerned for traffic impacts to the corridor and for the potential of negative impacts on residential properties in the immediate vicinity. Staff's recommendation in this case was to move to deny the requested amendment to the zoning ordinances. Planning Board's recommendation at their November meeting was to approve the requested amendment to the zoning ordinance from the properties from Forsyth County Residential Single Family to general business. And the vote on the rezoning case is shown on the screen. Again, this one carried with the majority of those members present.
Are there any questions of staff? This is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. And this is a combined public hearing on the KDP 67 and the K810. Mr. Grubbs?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening again. members of the board. Again, I'm Jason Grubbs, attorney with Coltrane Grubbs, 109 East Mountain Street, Suite C, 27284. And I represent the agent in this matter for the petitioner, Sherwood Forest Properties LLC. With me this evening, I've got Mr. Jim Sutton, who is together with his brother Jack. The Sutton brothers own Sherwood Forest Properties, that's a mouthful, LLC. And they have this property under contract to purchase it from the current owners. That's why we're before you this evening. We could go to the next slide, please. Basic information Ms. Garner's already covered there. She is correct. As of at least about 4:30 this afternoon, the PIN numbers that are on there appear to be the PIN numbers the tax office is using. So we'll hope they stick with those. We are requesting general business zoning. It is a general use request. If we can go to the next slide. There's an overview of the property. It is just south of Bunker Hill, Sandy Ridge Road on Highway 66. Hopefully that may depict a little bit better because it is, I agree with Ms. Garner, it's difficult to sort of illustrate because of the way the property is carved up. But everything that's shaded there in the teal colors is property that is part of the rezoning petition. So if we could go to the next slide. So as Ms. Garner already covered, the UDO basically indicates that general use rezoning to GB is intended for mainly retail service and office uses along thoroughfares, which is an important thing to note. This is certainly along one of our biggest and busiest thoroughfares. It's not intended to encourage strip development. That's not really an appropriate use for GB. And as noted in the staff report, this site meets all the requirements for GB zoning in terms of dimensional requirements. There are some additional specific requirements where you have GB abutting residential that it also meets or has the ability to meet. Those additional requirements are intended, to buffer those residential properties somewhat from the impact of a GB zoning on the property. So there is some of that already built in, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Next slide, please. So as also noted in the staff report, and this I feel like is a very important point, this property along Highway 66 is also within the town UDO's Highway Corridor Overlay District. As you know, we have overlay districts for all sorts of things in the UDO, primarily designed to impose some additional restrictions or incentivize particular types of development across different zoning categories. So in this case, the UDO states that obviously one of the goals here is to enhance the town's image via its major highway corridors. So just like we want high quality development residentially, we want it along corridors coming into town, leading out of town. We want to encourage quality highway development, establish Kernersville again as a unique high quality community, enhance business economy through attractive commercial areas, and preserve and enhance property values. So while this is a departure from the current zoning, we would contend there are some things built into the UDO, particularly through this highway corridor overlay, that enhance any development that's going to go on, regardless of whether it's GB or anything else. There's certain requirements that we're going to have to meet, regardless of what the zoning is or is changed to. So we could go to the next slide. Some of the things the Highway Corridor Overlay District does in particular, there's some design and material requirements around windows and other facade features. Architectural elements are required to look a certain way, things like cornice trim on flat roofs. So there's definitely going to be a look and feel that is to some extent dictated by this overlay district, regardless of whether we're rezoning to GB, HB, whatever. In this case, we would have to follow all of those. Next slide, please. On top of that, then the overlay district imposes some site plan type standards. While we're not able in this context with a general use rezoning to present a site plan to you, there are certain things that all sites in this overlay district are going to have to meet regarding situation of parking, limits parking in the front of the building, pushes most of the parking to the rear, requires some landscape street yards, certain additional setbacks, signage requirements or limitations, and we would contend, very importantly, limits some of the uses that would otherwise be allowed in a GB district. So you've got your GB district, you've got your list of uses, but Highway Corridor Overlay District says we're not going to allow these uses regardless of what the zoning classification is and whether they would otherwise be allowed. They're not going to be allowed within the overlay district regardless of the zoning. So if we can go to the next slide, you're going to see those are probably, we would certainly contend, the most intensive type uses that you would commonly see in GB. Things like fuel dealerships, motor vehicle storage yards, correctional institutions, dirt storage, things having to do with site clearing and that type of thing are not something you're going to see, which stands to reason in a major thoroughfare leading into town. That's probably not the image we want to project. We can go to the next slide. So as the staff noted, there are some development concerns that have been brought up throughout this process. One being that our proposed rezoning is inconsistent with land use designations of nearby properties. And if you noticed, when we went through some of the staff report, there are some nearby zonings, well, they may not be adjacent, which are not residential. And I'm going to give you a look at a few of those and let you take a look at whether they are inconsistent with nearby land use. So we go to the next slide, please. So this is if you're traveling south on Highway 66 towards High Point, after you pass the intersection of 66 and Bunker Hill, Sandy Ridge Road. It's an upholstery shop on the left-hand side, same side of the street as the subject property. Again, not placing any value judgments on these at all, just showing that there are some commercial uses fairly close by, in this case, within 200 yards probably of the subject property. Go to the next slide. This is on past the subject property, again, on the left-hand side if you're headed south on 66, another non-residentially zoned property. There's a vacant lot with some type of storage silo there to the back and a RV that, from what I can tell, tends to be there a lot. Not sure what's going on with that, but another look at property there, very close by to the subject property. And one more slide, please. And then this is, before you get to the subject property again, a hair salon, again, on the same left-hand side as you travel down 66. So we would contend that a general business use, all of those uses probably would be allowed, I would imagine, in general business. General business would not be all that inconsistent with a lot of the nearby properties. We can go to the next slide, please. Another concern is our request is inconsistent with development trends in the area. Again, with the idea sort of that a picture's worth 1,000 words, we'll take a look at some of the development trends in the area. If we could go to the next slide. This is High Point Audiological. If you're traveling south on 66, it's the opposite side on the right. It's an old primitive Baptist church that, in my opinion, is an excellent adaptive reuse that we need to see more of as we run out of land to develop. It's been turned into an audiological office. They've got storage for their remote vehicles there. Relatively new development in the last couple of years that was, I think, rezoned actually by the City County Planning Board. We could go to the next slide. This did not come through as well as I would have liked for it to, but that's looking, if you're traveling north on 66 back into Kernersville, to your left across the open space there towards Weldon. You see Weldon off in the distance. I was hoping the clock tower would pop a little bit more there. But again, indicative of development trends, just literally quarter of a mile up the road heading back into Kernersville. We would contend that, and I'm going to talk more about that in a moment, development trends in this area very much fall in line with most of the approved uses in GB. So we go to the next slide. And to that point, you've already approved a vast number of uses that are allowed in the GB district in Weldon's zoning. And I've got a handout. I don't know what the best way to provide this to the board is.
You could give it to Mr. Powell, and Mr. Powell hand it up to the board. Do you have multiple copies of it?
I've got enough for
Okay, the clerk-
everybody and Mr. Hooker. And
The clerk needs a copy too.
there should be about a dozen or more there, and I'll give you a moment to get those. This
So go ahead and
information-
keep talking.
Yeah, this information didn't lend itself at all to a slide. I tried it with the planning board, and it just doesn't really. It's difficult to follow. But basically, what you've got here is 3 columns. The column to the far left is going to be uses that are allowed in GB zoning, but not approved in Weldon. So right across the road, they're not approved. And the ones towards the bottom there with the 3 asterisks are ones that require some additional planning efforts beyond just a zoning permit. So the top ones without the asterisk are ones that are allowed sort of by right. The other ones require a permit or a Board of Adjustment hearing or something like that. Column on the far right, also in black, is going to be uses that are allowed in Weldon, not allowed in GB, but allowed in Weldon. You can see those outlined there as well. A couple of them, manufacturing B is a fairly intense manufacturing use that's not allowed in GB, but you can kind of take a look at those. I'm not going to read all of them to you. But most importantly, the center column there, the ones in green, are allowed uses in GB that have also been approved in Weldon's mixed use zoning. And so those carry over all the way to the backside, and as I said, are fairly numerous. Again, at the bottom, the ones with the 3 asterisks are ones that require some additional zoning efforts and aren't necessarily allowed by right, but could be done with some additional approvals. So as you can see, the vast number of uses that could go on right across the street in Weldon are things that can be done in GB. So again, we would contend this is lines up pretty well with those trends within the neighborhood. We go to the next slide, please. Next concern about developing this particular parcel is it's inconsistent with the land use plan intended to provide residents and visitors with views of rural vistas and scenic open space. And so while I think we would all agree that's important, we're certainly losing that at a fairly rapid rate. I'm not sure that this parcel really already is capable of providing those rural vistas and scenic open space. If we go to the next slide, we'll see what we look at when we look out across 66 from the front of the subject property. So that's Eastover, which is one of the entrances to Weldon, the main entrance there off of 66. It's beautiful. I love Weldon. I think it's a great concept, doing a great job. I'm not sure that's really a rustic, scenic, bucolic vista that you would preserve by not rezoning this particular property. We can go to the next slide. And then another concern, wide range of uses that would have a negative impact on adjacent residential development. It's difficult to really talk about this because being a general use rezoning, we can't get into the specifics of what we're going to do. I will tell you, my client does everything on a first-class level, and I have no reason to think they're not going to approach this project the same way. In a lot of ways, I think it stands to improve adjacent residential development, even though it's not going to be residentially zoned. When you look at some of the other uses nearby that are not residentially zoned, that maybe don't improve adjacent residential development, and we've got a couple of examples of those, we would contend we can improve the neighborhood even though we're going to be zoned general business. So we've got, next slide, we've got the fruit stand, I think is what it's called these days. Used to be a really great curb market years ago, is now, much to, I'm sure, Chief Tilley's chagrin, even though they don't probably go out quite that far. Another internet cafe in the neighborhood, probably not adding a whole lot to the residential character of the neighborhood already. And then almost directly across from it, next slide, is a storage building supplier, great display yard. You can go out there and pick one out. They got all kinds, nothing wrong with that, but it's not a residential use and it's 200 yards down the road from the subject property. So I'm not sure we're going to have that much of an adverse effect residential development wise compared to something like that. If we can go to the next slide. And then that wonderful bane of every planner and every planning board member and every elected official, traffic. There's certainly some concerns about traffic. Highway 66 is a busy road. We would not contend otherwise. We would contend, however, that there are some things already in place that are going to address some of the traffic concerns, and potential development could actually help through this particular section some of the traffic concerns. If we could go to the next slide there. So first of all, while there is not a site plan for you to approve, my client's still going to have to comply with all of the NCDOT controls around access to the site. They're not going to get to willy-nilly pick where they pull out onto Highway 66. In fact, they might not even be allowed to pull out on Highway 66. They do have access via McIdle Road, which Ms. Garner alluded to in her presentation. It's a private road, which is actually part of the land my client would be acquiring and connects and already has a connection to 66. Obviously, my client understands that they're going to have to comply with whatever DOT says to do regarding access, but NCDOT can stipulate all kinds of things that my client would have to pay for most of in the way of traffic improvements. It would also probably cut down on the number of entrances onto 66. There are currently 3 driveways connecting to 66 from the subject property. Those would likely go away as part of the development. So you're going to have actually fewer places to pull out on the 66. And really the traffic issues aren't necessarily caused by development right around the site. It's what's going on either end of 66 and people passing through this area that's adding to the traffic. And those problems are only going to continue with the development at Highway 66 and I-74, the Ralph Lauren area. That's all coming. It's going to continue to build out there. As staff has acknowledged, there are some road improvements that are coming. Unfortunately, you don't have any control over that. It'd be a whole lot easier if you did. I understand that. But they are coming, and as development leads to more use of that road, then NCDOT is hopefully going to take more seriously the need to do some of those traffic calming measures. I did speak with Milt Rhodes during your break. He was unfortunately not able to stay, but he's kind of leading the charge with the folks in Weldon, as well as at Moses Cone and Bishop McGinnis High School, on trying to get the speed limit lowered down through there. And so, we would certainly welcome that. Anything to do some traffic calming is going to be great. If we can go to the next slide, please. The truth of the matter, though, is that oftentimes our traffic improvements, and you know this from hearing rezoning cases, they do lag development oftentimes. I mean, think about all the areas of town that have developed. Oftentimes we're building roads to catch up with that development, and I'd contend that's better than building a road that goes nowhere. We don't want to be in the business of building roads in hopes that somebody's going to develop where we build the road. Let's make the road better where we've got development going on. So if we go to the next slide. So just in summary, our site meets all the dimensional requirements. Highway Overlay District really is intended for development along thoroughfares. We wouldn't have this in the Highway Corridor Overlay District if we didn't think there was going to be development going on in this area. It's really not inconsistent with nearby uses. We're not letting the cow out of the barn, so to speak, to go back to the whole rural analogy, by allowing this development. There's development further out 66. This is not sort of an opening of Pandora's box that's going to lead to high-rise development all the way to, I-74. There's potential for some positive impact on adjacent development. And really, this case is not about traffic. It's not about traffic problems that are already there and are already going to continue. In a lot of ways, those traffic problems are good things because it means we're growing. I'd much rather have a lot of people trying to get around town than nobody trying to get around town. This is really about having the courage to embrace some growth in an area that's already primed for it, and we would appreciate your support.
All right, we are out of time for proponents. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And this is a general use rezoning. So there is not a specific site plan being offered with no conditions being offered, and any uses that are allowed in this zoning designation will need to be considered by the board. And we also cannot consider the identity of, or the business of the petitioner, because this zoning would run with the land, and it could be any owner of the property for any use allowed in this zoning district.
And also, Madam Mayor, whichever way the motion is, if you'll make a motion on the development, on the KDP and the rezoning, include both in your motion.
Okay. So shouldn't we take two different votes?
With the split vote from staff recommendation and planning board recommendation, there have been two motions prepared. What was proposed by staff, and then an alternate if the board chooses to vote in favor for both the KDP and the rezoning as separate motions.
Okay. All right, the annexation is contingent on the rezoning. But the development plan and the rezoning should be consistent. Or I guess it wouldn't matter. It could be inconsistent. It'd be better if it was consistent.
That is a deep...
We could talk about that for hours, right?
Yes, we could.
Okay.
The board does typically like to see them in conformance. That has been your practice.
Okay. So when you're talking about, are you suggesting we take one vote and include the development plan and the rezoning in the same vote?
I think with Ms. Garner, I was thinking it would be in a different vote. So I think what you have in front of you is motion on two different, each item, so you can do it with what you have in front of you.
Okay. All right. So our first consideration would be the first question before us, which was included in the presentation by Mr. Groves and by Ms. Garner, the consideration of the Kernersville development plan, which would be the issue of whether this is rural residential and low-density residential in our view, or whether it should be an activity center. So the first, any discussion we have in the first vote would be on KDP 67, which was agenda item D. So is there any discussion by the board, or do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, motion approval of the resolution to designate the properties located 1827 and 1831 North Carolina Highway 66 South, being all of PIN 6884-76-4869 and PIN 6884-77-2003 from rural residential and low-density residential to activity center.
Okay, I have a motion in favor,
Second.
and I have a second. So motion by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson, second by Alderman Gorham. All in favor? It's unanimous. Okay. All right, now to the rezoning. That would be agenda item E and zoning docket K810. And it has PIN numbers, which we are assuming are correct. All right. Do I have a motion? Mr. Barrow, is your mic on? Is your microphone on? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I would move to approve the requested amendment to zoning ordinances of the town of Kernersville of rezoning property in case K-810 from FCRS-20 to GB. Said rezoning being consistent with the town's comprehensive plan as amended, and further being both reasonable and in the public interest because, number one, the Kernersville Development Plan and Land Use Plan support other commercial growth in close proximity to the area. And two, the GB zoning district is comparable to the TND zoning designations directly across NC Highway 66 South.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. All in favor? It's unanimous. Mr. Hooker, did you get the vote, the motion and the second?
That was Alderman Barrow and Alderman Gorham, correct?
Alderman Barrow and Alderman Thompson.
Mayor Pro Tem Thompson, sorry. You know, it's that whole switching from Alderman to Mayor Pro Tem that just throws us all off.
Well, he's technically Alderman and Mayor Pro Tem, so it's equally correct. What? Congratulations. When do you expect to begin construction? When? Fantastic. We're glad that you're the ones planning to build on it. Thank you.
And thank you for keeping your business in Kernersville as well.
So I was in another community in connection watching a new mayor being sworn in. And when the mayor pro tem was elected, he immediately informed him he was planning to take a 3-month vacation. All right, moving on to items F and G. The first is a public hearing on an annexation, voluntary contiguous annexation petition by Piedmont Triad Regional Council for property located at 1385 Cruise Farm Road, containing 3.98 acres, more or less, and a public hearing on the rezoning, which is item G, zoning docket K641A10. Ms. Garner?
The annexation, which is item F, is for the parcel as shown in red. It is one single parcel, just shy of 4 acres total. It was, the hearing was set for the annexation at your November meeting, and it has been duly advertised, and High Point has been notified in both cases, the previous and this case.
Okay, I do not see anyone signed up to speak on this item, but is there anyone here? Well, I'll declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here to speak in favor?
Thank you. I'm Matthew Dolge, the Executive Director at PTRC. I will not take any of your time, but I am here to tell you that we appreciate the consideration. This is contiguous to our current property, and we look forward to continuing to be good neighbors in that neighborhood. So thank you. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those as we move forward.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to our public hearing. All right, is there anyone here in opposition? I'll declare the public hearing closed.
May I have a quick
Be a
question?
vote on the annexation, item F.
I'm a delegate with PTRC. Am I able to vote on this matter?
I don't see why not, because it's not a funding decision, and you're not personally, I mean, you're not building this, or?
Sure, just want to make sure.
Yeah, I think it only pertains to contracts that we enter into
Okay,
with nonprofits.
thank you.
I think you can actually vote on it if you were an employee of them, as long as you weren't an owner. Is that right, Mr. Swisher? You're welcome.
As long as Matthew's not paying you to vote that way, you're not gaining anything from it.
We haven't spoken tonight.
If we see some greenbacks changing hand, then it might be a little different.
On that note, I'll motion to approve.
We've got a motion to approve the annexation by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson,
Second.
second by Alderman Gorham. All in favor? It's unanimous. All right, the next is the zoning docket, case 641A10.
This case is 641A10. We kept with the designation. This might just be a nerdy community development thing, but we kept with the designation because this entire corner was originally part of Carrollton, which then subsequently became the expanded Weldon. And so we figured that it was important to keep all of these cases together as they have tended to track together. However, this request is to go to institutional and public, not T&D C, but it is a request from Forsyth County Residential Single Family to institutional and public. And as such, all institutional and public uses would apply on the parcel. As shown, adjacent properties are zoned Forsyth County Residential 20, General Business Special, also in Forsyth County, Mixed Use Special across Cruise Farm Road, and then RS 20 to the south and the west as well. The land use plan for this parcel is Activity Center, which supports and encourages interconnectivity and variation of use within the Activity Center. And the Activity Center designation does support the institutional and public zoning district, so there is no KDP amendment with this case. With the general rezoning, all IP uses must be considered as part of the rezoning. There is not an overlay district that applies to this site, so all of the uses as shown would be eligible to be established. Staff's analysis is that the proposed IP zoning district and the Activity Center designation allow for a diversity of uses located on the site itself and interconnectivity with other parcels in the area to support the Activity Center's vision of a walkable mixed-use area is encouraged. Uses permitted in IP do not lend themselves to major impacts in the form of traffic generation, light and/or noise spillover for the remaining residential neighbors. And the UDO standards will provide for setbacks and buffering of adjacent properties to further protect adjacent residential properties. Planning Board and staff recommend approval of the requested change by rezoning the property in case 641.A10 from Forsyth County Residential Single Family to institutional and public, finding that it is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and being both reasonable and in the public interest because the IP zoning district is consistent with those plans and the IP zoning district is conducive to adaptive reuse of existing structures. This was heard at the November Planning Board meeting. All members present voted in favor. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, this is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. Matthew, would you like to speak again? All right, are there any other proponents? Is there anyone here in opposition? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed.
A motion to approve.
Okay. Catherine, is the motion recommended to be in any particular format? It's page 7 out of 11 on the.
It's also shown on the screen, but since you're voting with the Planning Board and staff recommendation, you probably could just further add that as presented by staff and recommended by the Planning Board.
Okay, we've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson and seconded with a very similar sounding voice, Alderman Gorham. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Do you have immediate plans, Matthew, for the property?
So we will be using it as a.
And if you'll come forward, then everyone can hear you. We stream, and so you have to speak to the mic to be heard later.
Well, one is, as you know, it's been a church for a number of years, and part of our sale agreement with the church is that they'll still be operating the church there on Sundays for services, so we're excited about that. They're great neighbors for us. And then we plan on using it during the week for ancillary meeting space for training facilities. So we do weatherization training, be low impact, probably most about 20 folks at a time for training at that facility. And then also some additional parking, quite frankly, that we need for our space. If you've been to meetings at our location, you know that we are pushed for parking there, and so we'll have extra parking back on that parcel. So we think, again, it'll be good for the neighbors. We've had good relationships there, and we'll try to continue those for you so you don't hear anything from us.
Super, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anything further before we move on? All right, next we're to our public session with speakers from the floor. Is there anyone who'd like to address the Board of Aldermen on an item not included on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will move on to item 2B. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, you have in your packet this is for the property located at 511 Club Road. The board voted to get bids to demolish the property. This property's been a nuisance for several years in regards to police calls for service, as well as a lot of town code violations regarding substandard housing, junk, things like that. The property owner that was living at the house passed away, and so no one was at the house, but we had some vagrants in the house that we anticipate would continue to stay in the house. So we requested the board order the demolition. The board approved that. We put it out to bid. You have in your packet the 5 bids that we received back, with the low bidder being Double D Construction Services at $8,672. So we are recommending awarding that contract to the board for demolition services.
Do I have a motion for approval? Motion by Alderman Penix.
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All in favor? All opposed? The vote is 3-1. Okay, item C, consideration of a resolution regarding a lease with Forsyth County. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, you have in your packet the lease. This is for the recycling center on Lindsay Street. I am going to ask the board, if you would, to table that until January 3rd. The reason being is in the lease we have proposed a rent amount of $23,000 per year to recover basically all the repairs and upgrades we did. Chairman Martin indicated that he was going to recommend to the county commissioners that they pay $18,000 a year. So I wouldn't want the board to approve it at $18,000 and then the county be willing to pay $23,000. Nor would I want you to approve it at $23,000 and then have to come back and change it. So they meet next Thursday. I don't know at that point in time what they approve it at, and then we can, if you will, continue it until January 3rd, and we can have a more definite idea of what they are willing to pay.
Could I have a motion to continue this item to the January 3rd agenda?
So moved.
Got a motion by Alderman Gorham. Second by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson. All in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, item 3 is a consent agenda. These matters are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion with no separate discussion unless a board member or citizen so request, in which event the matter will be removed from the consent agenda and considered under the following item. We only have one this week. It is item A, consideration of a resolution declaring badge and service weapon of Matthew Long as surplus and authorizing disposal. Matthew Long is retiring. Do I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
I'd make a motion for approval, Madam Mayor.
Got a motion by Alderman Barrow, second by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson. All in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, the town manager's report. Mr. Swisher. We need your microphone.
Madam Mayor, there we go. I have 4 items for your consideration. The first of those is an ordinance to prohibit parking on a portion of Southern Street. This is a street beside of Lowe's Foods that leads down to the Greenway. Been some parking in the area of the Greenway that restricts us from being able to get in and out of it. I think it also maybe blocks the driveway the house that is there. So we're recommending no parking on both sides of the street from the intersection with the Kernersville Greenway to a point 200 feet southeast of said intersection. So it'll be coming back toward Cherry Street for 200 feet. Gets them right past the house that is down there on the left, out of the way where they don't block them. And we can also get through to the Greenway if we need to.
All right, do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A motion by Alderman Gorham, second by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson. All in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, item B.
Second item, Madam Mayor, is our audit contract with Forvis. It ended December 1st. They were still working December the 1st, so we need to extend their contract to get them paid. Also, they had to do some more auditing on the grants that we received. So per their contract, it was $71,700. The new amount to cover that, there's two new GASB protocols they have to follow, GASB 87 and GASB 96. The original 71.7 did not include those. Per their fee schedule, it's $3,500 per each of those that they have to audit. So you see the $19,000 in addition, and that covers, like I say, the grants that we received. The big one of those is finalizing the Greenway grant. That was a grant through the federal government. We finalized that. And then the grants that we received from the state, as well as some of the other federal grants. So when they quoted the initial 71.7, that was not part of it. But again, they had the price for what they have to do if they have to do any extras above 2. And of course they did with all of the grants. So we need to vote to extend it. I think we're asking you to extend it until July 31st of 2024. And then of course approve the new amount of $90,700. And that is per their agreement that the board approved last year with those increase in prices. They did submit the audit today, so the audit has been submitted. We think it's probably late again, so you may get to sign another letter of indicator of weakness of financial indicator of concern or whatever. It's not a concern for us, but apparently it's a concern for the auditors, but never really understood that since they're the one that submits the audit late, and then it's a concern that it's submitted late. My answer to that is submitted on time, but it doesn't seem to bother them too much. So it did get submitted today, and they will be here, I think, January to do the report on the audit itself.
Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A motion by Alderman Gorham, second by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson. All in favor? It's unanimous.
Madam Mayor, item C is a reappointment of Edward L. Powell as town attorney. It's not approval of his contract, but reappointment. Actually not approval of his salary, but you're required to appoint a town attorney at the first meeting after the board is sworn in. So this is that meeting. So we are asking you to appoint Ed as town attorney or someone. If it's not Ed, we probably need to scramble around and find one. I would recommend Ed. Having worked with him for the last couple of years, I think he's done a fine job, and recommend the board reappoint Ed. I mean, I think at some point in time you'll go into closed session to discuss the other particulars of his contract.
Do I have a motion to reappoint Ed Powell as town attorney?
I would make a motion to reappoint Mr. Edward L. Powell as the town attorney.
A motion
And
by,
comment that I think he's done an excellent job the last 2 years I've been here.
we have thrown him some challenges.
Y'all could slow down on those, it would be appreciated.
Got a motion by Alderman Barrow, second by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson. All in favor? It's unanimous. Ed, you've done a fantastic job.
Y'all so much.
And Madam Mayor, the last item I have, I put it on today, so if you haven't had a chance to look over it and would like for it to be continued, that's fine. The reason I put it on today is there's no change. Basically in the lease agreement, it is a lease agreement for Providence Church over on Nelson Street. As you all remember, the town traded some property with the church. We acquired the church. We leased it back to the church. The only change, and they requested the change, we are now carrying the liability insurance on the actual building itself, property insurance on the building, and we are also going to maintain the yard there at the church. And talked to Gavin Cunningham, he's the head of the Board of Trustees. He asked us if we could do that and include it in the rent. It was minimal. It raised rent from $500 to $600 a month. I sent him the lease. He was fine with that. I told him I would put it on the agenda for tonight if you all wanted to consider it. If not, if you wanted to table it, then we would put it back on for January 3rd. But he said he was fine with it. He would take it to his board. Be glad to answer any questions. If you got any, again, everything else in it is the same way that it was. It's a year lease. It will be effective whenever we sign it and when they approve it as well. And it will run for a period of 1 year from that point. They've been great tenants. We've not had any issues with them. It's worked out well. Coordinating, the big events they have with the big events that we have there at the park. It's worked out really well. So we don't have any issues with it.
Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Motion for approval of the lease?
Yes.
Okay. Got a motion for approval of the lease by Alderman Gorham, second by Alderman Barrow. All in favor? It's unanimous.
And I do not have anything else, Madam Mayor.
I think that was fine with the shorter notice because we're maintaining the park, so we just mow that yard too.
Yeah, I mean, we're there. During the summer months, we're mowing Civitan Park Ernie. We're mowing it about every 7 days. So it's just a matter of probably 15 more minutes to mow their grass, saves them the trouble of having to bring someone in and do it. And probably, honestly, we're probably doing it cheaper than what they would hire it out to be done. So
It's keep it consistent too.
Yeah.
Everything's mowed at the same time.
Yep, not a problem for us. And the only other item is closed session for the board.
Mr. Powell, do you have anything for us in open session?
Just like to thank the board for your consideration of reappointing me, and I'll try to live up to your expectations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Barrow, what have you got for us today?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the Kernersville swimming pool that we're going to
Okay,
do in the next
talk into
couple
your
of
microphone.
years. I'm talking about, there's about 5 people in here. I want to talk about the Kernersville pool that we're going to do in the next year or two. Just keep that on everybody's mind. I'm working on it, and I've got a little bit of help, and when I get something formal, I'll come to the board with it. The other thing is, the only thing I got was calls from people from Caleb's Creek, but we've heard all of that tonight, so that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay.
I have nothing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman Gorham?
Yes, I'd just like to take this opportunity to wish the staff and all my partners here on the board a Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year.
Mr. Penix? Okay. All right, it looks like it's time for us to go into closed session. Do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318, .11A6, I move that the board go into closed session to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, and fitness, condition of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee, or prospective public officer or employee, or to hear or investigate a complaint, charge, or grievance by or against an individual public officer or employee.
Okay, I have a motion to go into closed session. Do I have a second? Got a motion and a second by Mayor Pro Tem. A motion by Mr. Clerk, Alderman Gorham, and a
Motion
second.
by Alderman Gorham, second by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson.
Okay, you got it? All right. All those in favor? It's unanimous. We're now in closed session. Thank you. Is there any further business before the board this evening? If not, may I have a motion to adjourn? A motion by Mayor Pro Tem Thompson.
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All in favor? It's unanimous. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.